these are eternal truths, really, really deep, that has been hidden from humanity for millennia. This is what they don't want you to know. The real law of attraction and how to apply it in your life. Many people will be familiar with the New Age variants of the so-called law or laws of attraction. And this is going to differ quite widely from what people have heard in the New Age community, in the New Age movement regarding what the law or laws of attraction are. These are the real laws of attraction you're going to be hearing today and hopefully understanding today. Human beings everywhere say that they want certain things in their life. And they say that they want certain things to be present for all humanity. We say we want certain conditions to be present for ourselves and our species as a whole. And we say we want things such as happiness, health, peace, prosperity, freedom, etc. And all these things are great things to aspire to. And we say we want them. Most people will say and tell you we want these things. There are requirements for obtaining the conditions that we say we want. Requirement exists in nature. It does exist. If you want something to be different than the way that it already is, than the default conditions, then requirement exists. If you're okay with things being the way that they are now, requirement doesn't exist. There are no requirements to creating change. You just accept the default conditions the way they are now and go on with your existence and accept it's going to be this way and possibly get worse.
Never before in the history of humanity, any generation had these kind of conveniences, these kind of comforts, these kind of wonderful things that we have today. Never before human survival was better organized than it is today. If we don't do it now, when? Many great beings have come on this planet, but when they spoke, hardly 10 people could hear. Today we can sit here and talk to the entire world. When we have this, if we do not transform the world into a more loving, joyful, exuberant humanity, it simply means we don't care. I don't want to go as that.
But if you want real change to happen, requirements exist. And this is what many New Age teachers will not tell you, or they'll outright deny that requirements exist for creating real change. Specific requirements exist in order for human beings to obtain the conditions that they say they want. If the requirements for obtaining those conditions are not met, those conditions do not just magically manifest by magical means automatically. That's not how it works. This is a key concept to understand. We need to know certain things. Knowledge is required. Knowledge. Knowledge that will spur us to action. That's what's required. This knowledge is occulted, meaning hidden. But what you have to understand right off the bat is that the word occult is simply derived from Latin, the Latin adjective occultus. Occultus in Latin means hidden, hidden from sight. The information regarding natural law is occulted knowledge. It is knowledge that has been hidden from humanity. It's held by the few, which is represented here at the top of this pyramid. You can look at this as a pyramid representing knowledge or ignorance. At the top of the pyramid, you have knowledge. The higher you go in the pyramid, the more knowledge. But the pyramid tapers because at the top, very few people understand that information. Down here, you have no knowledge. The ignorant masses. What is this occulted knowledge? Occult knowledge constitutes two things. There's two general bodies of occult knowledge. In the actual mystery traditions and in occult schools, they talk about these as arcana, A-R-C-A-N-A. The word arcana is also Latin. It means knowledge. It means it's dealing with the individual units of consciousness, the human psyche. The first major body of occult knowledge constitutes knowledge of human consciousness, how it works, how it operates, what our motivations are. The second body of occult knowledge is called the greater arcana or the major arcana. And what these natural laws are unseen and universal spiritual laws which govern the consequences of behavior for intelligent species, for beings that are capable of coming to their understanding. It's been called karma, karmic law, in many Middle Eastern and Eastern traditions. It has been called in some of the Western traditions and Christian traditions moral law. Religionists have called it God's law. Why is this knowledge hidden away from people? And there's a reason for that. In order to create and maintain a power differential. They know how something works, like how human consciousness works, how human motivations work, how human perceptions work, how human beings can be manipulated. This is the thing that all the distractions are there for, to keep you from learning. The endless trivialities, the nonsense you hear on the news, all the video games, all of the nonsense television. It's all there to keep people from understanding this. Truth versus human perception. See these white lines? Imagine these white lines that do not waver as truth. And imagine that the perception that is set against the truth, we're going to take three different individuals. This is individual A, this is individual B, this is individual C. Their ability to perceive what has occurred and what is occurring is what I would refer to as consciousness. If your consciousness is high, meaning it's at a high frequency, that means you're going to have more of an ability to understand and recognize the patterns. If your consciousness is low, you're at a low frequency, you're going to see the pattern less. The longer the wavelength, the shorter the frequency. What that means is how frequently is it going to be intercepting the line that represents truth. The higher the frequency, the more in tune with truth we are. What would happen if this frequency became infinitely high? It would be indistinguishable from a line. And therefore, someone would be aligned to that which is their perception of reality being accurate. Think about this in sound, right? You hear a low bass tone, it's like, then it goes up, and it would go eventually outside the range of human hearing because the frequency went so high. Same concept here. The higher the frequency, the higher the perception of reality, the quality of the perception is going to be. The concept to keep in mind here is perception is not reality. It's the filter we see reality through. Down here is the reptilian brain. It's comprised of the brain stem right here, and this part of the brain is called the cerebellum. These two components together essentially comprise the R complex. The R complex is the lowest consciousness part of the brain. We don't do any thinking with this part of the brain. It's the reactive part of the brain. It reacts to stimulus. It's the stimulus response mechanism. In this middle part of the brain, these are all the different glands like the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the pituitary and pineal glands, etc., that comprise the midbrain or the limbic system. All human emotions are facilitated, are made possible by this part of the brain. The neocortex is the outer casing, basically, of the telencephalon, the higher brain. What you have to understand about the telencephalon, or the hemispheres of the brain, is that they're, first of all, bilaterally symmetrical, and they generally control different functions of thought. But in general, the left hemisphere of the brain is what governs logic, analytical thought, and scientific and mathematical thinking, and also linear thought processes. The right side of the brain, the right hemisphere, governs or generally facilitates and makes possible human creativity, all the emotional dynamics of the human being, holistic thought, being able to see the big picture thinking, pattern recognition, and then things like compassion, nurturing, care. Now, if this left part of the brain becomes chronically dominant, the masculine part of the brain, and I'm putting these symbols here, this is an ancient archetypal symbol called the blade. It's a simple upward pointing triangle. And this downward pointing triangle is another ancient archetypal symbol that was referred to in the ancient world as the chalice, the cup, etc. Okay? And this was a rudimentary phallic symbol, and this was a rudimentary womb symbol, representing the male and the female. The idea is to keep a balance between these two. When we have a balance between the two, that's when we're operating on all cylinders, so to speak. That's when real consciousness and pattern recognition is developed. And that's when real morality and ethical considerations are also created within the personality, within the being. People have equated intelligence with intellect, especially in the Western society, all right? Intellect is not intelligence. Intelligence comprises more than intellect. Intellect is left brain understanding. True intelligence is holistic understanding, with the right brain included in the process, the nurturing, compassionate, creative, and intuitive sides of the consciousness together with the intellectual aspect of the consciousness. And you could see this in the word, intelligence, right? Intella is where intellect comes from, okay? And gens, G-E-N-C-E, comes from the Latin verb generare. Generare means to generate or to create. So it's the creative aspect of the personality, or the right brain. So intellect plus creativity, logical thinking plus nurturing and compassion. That's real intelligence, holistic intelligence. And most people in our society are not in holistic intelligence. They're in one form of brain imbalance or the other. If a human left brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the R complex will take over executive function of the brain, and the person will become ruled by selfishness and base desires. And they will develop a personality that is based in domination and control. Conversely, if a human being's right brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the limbic system will take over executive function of the whole brain, and the person will become ruled by their own emotions and develop a personality that is based in submissiveness and naivete. The general principles of natural law. Natural law is expressed through 7 basic underlying principles, plus what I have referred to as an 8th or hidden principle, which you hear very few other researchers, even people who are studying this from the occult perspective, who are studying this from the consequentialism perspective, you very hear them incorporate the 8th and all-encompassing principle. This 8th principle, which I call the lost principle, binds all the other 7 principles together. These principles together constitute a master key through which universal wisdom, including the knowledge of the requirements to obtaining what we desire, is then unveiled or de-occulted. These are the 7 general principles of natural law: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. The principle of mentalism states that the all, everything in creation, is actually a manifestation of mind. The principle of correspondence states that that which is above is similar or like to that which is below. So what this means is, it's a mirror, okay? The above is like the below is like the above. The principle of vibration simply states that there is no such thing as rest. Everything vibrates, and at the most fundamental level, the universe and every single thing which comprises it is ultimately pure vibratory energy that is manifesting itself in different ways, different frequencies, different vibratory forms. The principle of polarity states that everything has a dual nature to it. There are polarities in everything that exists, okay? Everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. However, opposites, they are identical in nature, but they're different in degree. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. Everything has a rhythm to it or a swing to it. There's tendencies that exist in energy. The pendulum swing manifests in everything that we undergo, everything that we perceive. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. It's just an opposite. It's perceived as an opposite. Rhythm will compensate. This is the principle here in natural law that most fits in with how I'm using the term natural law today, cause and effect. So the principle of cause and effect simply states that every cause has its effect and every effect has its cause. Every single thing that occurs happens according to law. Chance is a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. You cannot change the past. You can change what it is starting now and make sure that it gets changed in the future. But right now, what is the truth, And all you could do is accept that or reject it. The final principle of the 7 principles of natural law are gender. Again, I'm going to talk about an 8th lost one. Gender exists in everything. Everything has its masculine and its feminine components or principles. We've already seen that when it comes to the human brain, consciousness, worldview, etc. Gender manifests on all planes of existence: spiritual, mental, physical, everything. This next section is what I call the lost principle. This is the 8th principle of natural law, which binds all of the other principles together. It's the container inside which all the other principles fit very nicely and neatly. However, it's lost because we're not exercising it. See, we already looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 principles of natural law. And there they are represented by these circles overlapping each other. Here's the 8th circle, the seed of life.
Science will always push the limits of our understanding. Humanity is on a quest to expand our knowledge, to dig deeper, to look further, and to uncover the truth of reality. For generations, religious teachings once held to the belief that Earth was only a few thousand years old. With the rise and study of evolution and geology, a consensus emerged that our planet was actually millions of years older. By the 1920s, radiometric dating would lead to the current understanding that Earth is 4.55 billion years old. But where did the Earth come from? In the same decade, a Belgian priest named Georges Lemaitre introduced the Big Bang Theory, in which he theorized that the universe began from a single primordial atom. The idea received a major boost from Edwin Hubble's observations that galaxies across the cosmos are speeding away from us in all directions, as well from the 1960s discovery of cosmic microwave radiation. But where did the Big Bang come from? What happened before the Big Bang, which occurred 13.8 billion years ago? Someday we might know the answer, and once we have the answer, the next logical question will be, what came before that? Sacred geometry reverse engineers our method of scientific exploration. It does so by starting with the logical beginning of everything, which is nothing. Before there was something, there was nothing. The universe was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. The first thing to come into existence was a point. Before anything could be, it has to start with a point. A point occupies no space, it has no dimensions. It's so small it can't be measured, yet it encompasses everything within it. You could say this point is spirit. And what is the first thing that spirit does? It becomes conscious. It becomes aware. 360 degrees of awareness in the vast emptiness of the void. The ancient Egyptians believed that this innate aspect of consciousness is what sparked the process of creation. Then what did spirit do? The only thing it could do, it moved. The first 3 lines of Genesis in the King James Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Now, interpretations of the Bible have varied a lot over time, but the important thing to note here is that movement happened before there was light. From the vantage of pure physics or mathematics, motion is impossible in a void. You can't go anywhere, or fall, or rotate. There's just infinite emptiness in all directions. So in order to move, you need something in relation to move to. Before there was light, there was movement. Once spirit created a point in space, it was able to move to the edge of its awareness and expand consciousness, creating another circle to form the Vesica Piscis. This football-shaped opening in the middle is the geometric image through which light was created, and it is also the geometric shape through which our eyes receive light. Spirit would continue to expand its awareness, following the Genesis pattern, by moving to each intersection of the circumferences and expanding. The second movement creates the third circle, which forms the Holy Trinity. With each movement, more information unfolds. By the fourth motion, we have moved halfway around the first circle, 180 degrees from the first motion. On the fourth day of Genesis, exactly half of creation was completed. After 6 movements, 6 days, a geometric miracle takes place. We have a complete pattern, the seed of life. This complete pattern is called the seed of life, for it contains the recipe of life and all its potential. The second rotation of circles forms a 3-dimensional shape. The ancients who were concerned with life and death called this cluster of spheres the egg of life. Your entire existence is dependent on the egg of life structure. Everything about you, from your height to your eye color, was created through the egg of life form. Spirit would continue this pattern with a third rotation. 19 circles produces the flower of life, a shape that is found in ancient cultures around the world. From China to Ireland to Egypt to India, they all had some notion of the flower of life. Why is this shape so special? Because the information hidden in the flower of life is so important and so sacred that our ancient ancestors had to keep it secret, which was appropriate at that time. However, now, we either use the information or fall further into darkness. When the flower of life is extended out and all the circles are completed, the fruit of life is revealed. This is the secret. Out of the flower comes the fruit. The fruit of life is an entirely feminine shape. Curved lines are feminine. They represent formlessness and emotion. Once we add masculine energy or lines, the formless begins to take shape. This is Metatron's cube, and it contains the fabric of reality, because out of this shape, we get the Platonic solids. Platonic solids have faces that are all the same size, edges that are all the same length, angles that are all the same degree. And if put into a sphere, all points will touch the edge of the sphere. These shapes were studied in ancient times by the Egyptians, who passed the knowledge to the Greeks, where Pythagoras would study them, and later Plato, which is where we get the name Platonic. There are 5 Platonic solids: the cube, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the isosahedron, and the pentagonal dodecahedron. Earth, air, fire, water, and ether, or prana. Each Platonic solid corresponds to a different element, and every element of the periodic table has a geometric relation to one of the Platonic solids. From the motion of atoms, to molecules, to viruses, to snowflakes, to the shape of sound, to the orbits of the planets in our solar system, everything stems from this basic geometric information system. And it all starts with spirit. As above, so below. There's as much greater than us than there is lesser than us. There's as much outside us as there is within. Everything above us and everything below us is constructed from geometric relationships. When we study sacred geometry, we begin to understand our place in the universe. All this expansion of consciousness, all this curious exploration is really about finding out who we are. We are a mystery to ourselves, and to uncover where we came from is to know ourselves on the deepest level. Everything, from the smallest particle to the biggest star, is connected, and you are at the absolute center of it all. Philosophy is written in this grand book, the universe, which stands continually open to our gaze. But the book cannot be understood unless one first learns to comprehend the language and read the letters in which it's composed. It is written in the language of mathematics, and its characters are triangles, circles, and other geometric figures, without which it is humanly impossible to understand a single word of it. Without these, one wanders about in a dark labyrinth. Galileo Galilei.
Now, what happens from a seed? It grows. It generates something. It creates something. Here's what that principle is. It's the eighth or the lost principle. And it's the thing that has to be present in order for any change to manifest itself. Here's what the eighth principle is. It is known as the generative principle, or the principle which governs creation, which actually is the causal factor that goes into effect and generates the result that we say that we want. But what's the real term for it? Now, most people will say it's love. The generative principle is care. This is different than compassion. People say, why don't you use the word compassion? Because that's not what I'm talking about. It is a different concept than compassion, or even what I would describe as love. This means, what are you giving attention and helping to grow? What are you focusing upon? Because what you're focusing upon, that's what's ultimately getting generated, getting created, and growing. And this doesn't mean be ignorant of what's going on in the world and don't look at anything that's negative because you're going to feed that and give power to it. That's not what it means. That means, you know what you're feeding? In that instance, if you want to do that, you're feeding ignorance. And that's what's going to grow. It's the exact opposite that the New Agers want you to believe that it is. By ignoring the negative, you are ensuring that more of it occurs. You are fueling it by ignorance. This is what you're giving your energy to. This is what you're focused upon. This is what you actually care enough about to do, to spend your time on, to put your attention on, to manifest in the world. That's what I'm talking about as care. That's what generates our experience in the aggregate. Most people don't care about what's really happening. Therefore, it is an impossibility for us in the aggregate to change the direction of energy, to change the direction of consciousness, and ultimately to get what we say we want. That's how the real law of attraction works. Here's how it actually operates. The lost principle is the dynamic of care. What we care about on a day-to-day basis acts as the driving force of our thoughts and actions. What did I say we need to develop? The heart, mind, guts, right? Heart, mind, guts, in that order. Care comes first. You got to care enough to know, to develop the knowledge, okay? Then you got to act on it and put it into practice. Apply it. So that's the order. Heart, mind, guts. Care, knowledge, action. Those are the steps. And all three of those have to be in place. That's what unity consciousness is. It's unifying thoughts, emotions, and actions. The three aspects of consciousness, such that there is no contradiction between them. Our thoughts, what we say, what we think, how we feel, and how we act are one and the same. There's no contradiction. That's unity consciousness. Therefore, care is the driver of our thoughts and actions. It ultimately can be seen as the generator of the quality of our shared experience here on the earth. Care is what generates the whole thing. Hence, it has been called the generative principle. Liken the heart to a pump in the body. Well, what does a pump do? It's a generator. It provides energy. It moves the life force through the blood in the body. In every ancient tradition, they talked about the life force being in the blood. The heart is what pumps that through the whole physiology and enables us to continue to sustain life. As important as the brain is, which we just talked about the importance of it, the heart is ultimately what's generating the experience, because what we care about determines what we think about on a daily basis most of the time, and therefore how we behave. The dark occultists know that the thing that is ultimately generating our reality is behavior. Action is what's generating the reality. That gets generated through what we care about, because our cares and our desires drive our actions. What we care about on a day-to-day basis acts as the driving force of our thoughts and actions. And anybody telling you it's different than that is lying to you. And if you have some common sense and really think about it, you'll understand what I'm saying here is absolutely the way it is. Anybody familiar with the compasses and square symbol of Freemasonry? With the G in the middle? Well, that's what the G stands for. They're given the information, well, this only means geometry, it only means God, etc. One of the things they'll tell you it means at a slightly higher level is that it means gnosis, knowledge. At a higher level, at illuminated levels of Freemasonry, which are above the 32nd degree, they will give you what the real meaning of the G inside the compasses and square is. It is the generative principle. It means Genesis, creation. That's what that G really stands for. Here's how it works, folks. What we care enough to put our will behind. What we care enough to put our will behind is ultimately what gets created or manifested in our world. The world is the way that it is because most people do not care enough, even if they say, they pay lip service and say that they want things to be different. They don't care enough to actually change it through their actions. Many people want to deceive you through these religious notions, which is all about getting people to stand down and accept their chains. This next section I call spiritual currencies. There's two spiritual currencies, time and attention. We can readily see this, right? Time is money, people say. It's currency. What am I going to spend my time on? What am I going to pay attention to? Pay attention. You pay for something, you get something in return when you pay for something. That's what attention will get you here. It will get you something in return. You pay attention, you're going to come out of here with a lot of understanding. This analogy can be seen very readily in the saying, spending time and paying attention. Whatever information or endeavors we put our time and attention toward, we end up getting something in return for that investment of these currencies. This is what real money is, folks. Real money. Money is not a medium of exchange. People think of it as a medium of exchange, and it's not. It's incorrect. Money is the limiter of energy in the system. People think of money as currency. Even the name is a mind control technique because it's supposed to be about, it's the current in the energy system. It's the resistance in the system. It's the resistance to change in the system. The ability to see, to unoccult something and see it for what it really is. That's what comes from truly putting time and attention onto the right things. This return could come in the form of knowledge. It could come in the form of understanding. It could come in the form of skills, expertise, and empowerment. But only if we invest these two spiritual currencies wisely. That's why most people don't have any money. They got nothing to pay for it with. See, you pay attention and you get money. You spend time and you get money. We should seek to improve our quality of attention by placing it upon information that is capable of improving both ourselves and the human condition as a whole. Such an effort would also constitute a valuable investment of our time. We should ask ourselves, what am I spending my time on? What am I spending my time doing? And what am I paying attention to? That's where you will find whether you're investing in real value, something that is truly valuable. Most of the time we're spending our time on nonsense and trivialities and, divisive things and TV and sports and all other kinds of entertainment and distraction. Well, you're going to have a return on that investment, and that return is going to be low. Most importantly, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of quality am I getting in return for my investments of time and attention? This is a simple chart of how our quality of our attention, this is in the aggregate, but it's created by all the individuals, how the quality of overall attention as a species will affect our world in accordance with the principle of correspondence. Over here, we have a pure information stream. This is good information. This is information that is capable, that resonates with truth, and is capable of helping to develop wisdom or right action within the being. This over here is the poisoned information stream like we get from the mainstream media, from scientism, from the New Age movement, from government indoctrination centers called schools. This is the poisoned information stream. What the goal needs to be is to purify. Just like, hey, you take in bad food, you're going to have bad health. You take in bad information, the output through behavior is going to be bad. So you got to purify. Meaning, if there's valves here on the individual buckets, these are called the individual people, And they're all coming together with the quality of their water, what they're holding within their consciousness, and that's all going into the big pool called the world. The quality of this whole thing here is going to be based on how much poison, polluted information was in your bucket compared to how much pure information was in your bucket. So there's valves over here. We got to shut this one off, this brown muddy valve over here, and we got to open this one up. If we do that, the world will be purified. How are we spending our time? What are we paying attention to? Reading is required. The ancient Romans had two words, the same word, that meant two different things in their language. The word was liber, L-I-B-E-R. Liber meant free, as in not a slave. A free being would be described as liber, free. It's the basis of the English word liberty, liberty, freedom. They had the same word, also meant a different concept, book. They associated the Latin word for book also meant free in their language. Liber is the basis for the word library, library, where you can go to become free if you read the right books. Natural law has been called many different things in different traditions throughout the world at different times in history. It's been called the law of cause and effect. And there's a scientific connotation to this concept of cause and effect too. Even scientists will say an effect invariably follows a cause. And they'll also say things like, for every action, there exists an equal and opposing reaction. So there's a consequence when an action is taken. In the New Age circles, you've heard it referred to as the law or laws of attraction. The energy that we emit is the energy that we attract. This is true. What we're putting out into the universe is what we're getting in return from the universe and what we're creating in our reality. Energy flows where attention goes. As you think, feel, and act, so you shall be. It's been called karma. It's been called moral law. What we sow, we reap. The seeds that you scatter, that's what's going to grow, and that's the fruit that you're going to harvest. And finally, the golden rule, it's been called. And it's been stated in the affirmative as, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. I think it would have been much less ambiguous, the golden rule, if it was said like this: do not do to others as you would prefer not to have done unto you. How natural law actually works in our lives. What are its expressions? How can we come to understand how this operates? There are ways of knowing. They're through these expressions of natural law. What these expressions are the recognizable workings in our life. And they take place through 5 basic expressions. Each of the 5 expressions of natural law have a positive aspect and a negative aspect. So that gives us a total of 10 overall natural law expressions. And we're going to build a chart regarding these expressions. So here's the expression, and then there's a positive aspect to the expression, and there's a negative aspect to the expression. The first expression of natural law is known as the first principle of natural law, the generative polarity. Or in other words, this is the force or energy that we are using at the base level to start the process of creation, or you could say of co-creation. You could look at the first expression of natural law, which is the generative polarity, as the force that we use to set all of the other events which are to come, which are to manifest in our lives, into motion. Or in other words, the force that we use to generate or create the quality of our experience. That's the generative polarity. The positive expression of the generative polarity is love. This is not what many people think of as love. It's not familial love. It's not relationship love. I call love consciousness. Love is the force which helps us to expand consciousness and become open to truth if we are in it. If we are in that vibratory energy, we become open to truth. So here's what it looks like visually. Love is inside each individual if it's present. It doesn't depend on any other person. You can express love with another person, and there's no problem with that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's a great thing if it's present in your life. The capital L, capital O, capital V, capital E definition of love that I'm giving here is not that. It is this force that opens up our consciousness. It's the flowering expression of consciousness. The positive aspect of the generative polarity, the first expression of natural law, is love. In regard to natural law, love should be seen as the expansive force for consciousness. It is the force which helps us to become open to truth and expand our awareness. That's the positive expression of the creative polarity. The negative expression of the creative polarity is the exact opposite of love. So people will automatically think, well, that's hate. And it is not. Because the thing that puts consciousness in a box and prevents it from growing and keeps it where it's at is what? Fear. Fear is the basis for unconsciousness. You cannot be unconscious of anything in particular unless you fear it. That's what shuts consciousness down. I don't want to look at that. That's too horrible for me to contemplate. That can't be true. I don't want that to be true. That's all fear. The negative aspect of the generative polarity is fear. Fear is the contractive force for consciousness. Fear is the force which influences us to become closed to the truth, and it is the force which ultimately shuts down our awareness. That's why so many people are unconscious, because they are fearful. They are fearful of the responsibility that comes with knowledge, and most of all, they are fearful of having to act based upon knowledge, because that requires courage. The second natural law expression is the initiating expression. The initiating expression is the first stage of tangible and recognizable results which we produce in our lives after we have, quote unquote, set the ball rolling, set the dynamic in motion by choosing between the generative polarities of either love or fear. We choose love and something starts to happen. We become open to truth. Well, love is the expansive force for consciousness that opens our minds to the truth and awareness. So what do we gain as a result of accepting or existing in the vibratory energy called love? We gain knowledge, which is the acceptance of truth. Since love opens us up to truth, knowledge is its reception. It is the receiving of truth. Know the self and you will know the universe. In other words, know the microcosm and you will know the macrocosm. The positive aspect of this initiating expression is knowledge, or the acceptance of truth. Knowledge positively influences the quality of our lives because it positively influences our decision-making processes that lead to understanding in every area of our lives. You want to know how something works and ultimately create something good? You have to have knowledge. You want to know how a car works? Keep it running in good order, you have to have knowledge. You want to know how a computer works? Keep it running in good order, you have to have knowledge. Learning is the key, it's the answer. Of course, there's a negative initiating expression if we are existing in the vibratory dynamic of fear. That would be the opposite of knowledge, ignorance. Ignorance is the refusal of truth. It is the refusal to gain knowledge. The negative aspect of the initiating expression of natural law is ignorance, or the refusal of truth. Ignorance negatively influences the quality of our lives because it negatively influences these decision-making processes that lead to understanding in every area of our lives. If you're ignorant about how anything works, you can't create the desired condition. It's important to remember, again, that ignorance should be distinguished from nescience, which means not knowing because necessary information is not present or was unattainable. Ignorance, on the other hand, means not knowing even though necessary information is present because that information has been willfully refused or disregarded. The internal expression is what happens inside of us, very simply. We've started creating with a polarity. Something has happened in the world, either acceptance of truth or refusal of truth. Now something's going to take place inside of us. This is the foundation that lies underneath the trivium. What happened after knowledge, or lack thereof? We went up to understanding. So that's what this level is. Understanding happens internally, right? It's an internal process. The positive aspect of the internal expression is when we come to understand through developing the knowledge and the acceptance of truth that we are sovereign. Sovereignty is the expression, the internal positive expression of natural law. Internal monarchy. Now, monarchy means one ruler. Mon means one, is a prefix for one, and archon in Greek means ruler or master. The positive aspect of the internal expression is sovereignty, or what I call internal monarchy, meaning one ruler within. Internal monarchy, one ruler within. As a state of consciousness, sovereignty means that one has unified the three aspects of their consciousness, such that there is no internal contradiction between one's thoughts, emotions, and actions. We become a being that as we think, so we feel, so we speak and act. Sovereign is derived from the Latin adverb super. Super means above. It means above or beyond. That's what it means. A superman is one who's beyond an ordinary man. The Latin noun regnum comprises the second part of the etymological root of this word. Regnum, it comes from rex. Rex regis in Latin, or regis. It means king. So regnum was the king's rulership. Rulership or externally imposed control. Sovereign means not a subject to another being, like a king, like one who considers himself a king. And it means not a slave to someone who considers themselves your master. Sovereign is a monarch, which means a single ruler who rules only the kingdom of self. Sovereignty is a state in which one controls one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions, and by bringing them into unity or non-contradiction or non-duality, attains mastery over one's own consciousness. Sovereignty could be considered the equivalent of true self-control, true self-mastery, true self-love, or true self-ownership. It's all of these things. And ultimately, it means not a slave. That's what has to be remembered above all else. The negative internal expression for natural law, which is confusion. Now, confusion results when we are in ignorance. Confusion only happens in a lack of understanding. When we have not taken in knowledge, because we are afraid, we are in fear, ignorance results, and then confusion happens internally. Inside of us, there's anarchy, which means the absence of ruler. This negative aspect of the internal expression of natural law is confusion, or what I call internal anarchy, meaning no ruler within. Confusion is the state of mind in which the being is ruled by fear and ignorance. Confusion could be seen as internal opposition within one's own consciousness. In other words, being torn apart from within in such a way that one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions are in perpetual contradiction with each other. The fourth expression of natural law is what happens externally in the macrocosm in society. If there's love present and knowledge has been taken in and it's been understood and we understand that we're sovereign and we're expressing self-ownership and self-mastery, what state manifests in society? Freedom. Freedom can only manifest when those preceding conditions are in place. It cannot magically manifest by any other means. If we say we want to be free, this is the path we have to take. Consciousness, acceptance of truth, and an understanding of our own sovereignty through self-mastery. The positive aspect of the external expression is freedom, or what I call external anarchy, meaning externally there are no rulers, there is no condition of masters and slaves. True freedom for all should be seen as the goal of spiritual development. Such a state can only manifest as a result of human society's adherence to natural law. The only way it is possible for it to manifest is if we understand and adhere to natural law. Now, there's a negative external expression, control. Control is what I call external monarchy. The fifth and final expression for natural law, how it operates in our lives, is what I call the manifestation, or the result that we create. The positive manifestation is order. All the things we say we want, manifested goodness. This would be, we get what we say we want to get. And there's requirements for that, and here they are. You got to be in this vibratory energy of consciousness. You have to accept the truth and develop knowledge. You have to have an understanding that you're a sovereign being, and you have to work toward the manifestation of true freedom. Then you'll have all the things you say you want, manifested goodness and order in your life. And that's the only path to it. The positive manifestation, manifested goodness. It represents everything we say we want, and it only results when there is balance or justice. Justice comes about through adherence to natural law. Justice can only be present when truth has been accepted in our lives and our behavior has been brought into harmony with natural law. Cannot manifest any other way. That's the positive manifestation. The negative manifestation is the opposite of order, chaos. Chaos is manifested evil. The negative manifestation, chaos or manifested evil, is the exact opposite of what we say we want. Chaos results when there is imbalance and injustice, which results whenever there is ignorance of truth and behavior which is in direct opposition to natural law. So that's our chart, and one last thing I want to say about it is that the manifestations or the expressions of natural law, they're unilateral. They don't cross into each other. There's no such thing as, well, I've accepted the truth and I've developed knowledge, so now I'm in a state of confusion. It doesn't work like that. You can't go from ignorance to sovereignty, to the understanding that you're sovereign. You cannot cross the area of these charts. Please keep this in mind. These expressions are unilateral. They cannot be skipped either. They must proceed in order and in the same column of expression. So you can only get to order through freedom, which comes about through the understanding that we are sovereign, which comes about through taking in knowledge of truth, and which comes about through staying in a vibratory energy of love or higher consciousness, the openness to truth. That's it.